Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I'm Bill, the company's expert, and welcome to the weekly live stream where we talk about job search, everything you could possibly want to know about job search, and a lot more besides. This is primarily a Q&A, so if you are seeing my face, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity, and if you are a subscriber to my channel, you should be able to get in there and ask me questions. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and I will do my best to help you out. This is episode number 118, if you can believe that. It's called, What's the Most Dishonest Thing You've Ever Done? Best answer. So we're going to be kicking things off by talking about that question. And yeah, those were my notes. I did make myself some notes this time, so I'm really happy about that. Instead of my usual, just totally off the cuff, off the top of my head kind of thing. So, as always, I want to say a special shout out to my YouTube channel members, my super thanks donors, my Patreons, and of course to you, my viewers, my participants. You're awesome. Thank you for being here. If you are between jobs right now, just remember that you are highly employable. It doesn't feel like that, but that's the reality. If you are just coming out of school, remember you are also highly employable, even though it doesn't feel like that. Job search is a totally separate thing to being qualified for a job. That just because you're qualified for a job doesn't mean that you can easily find a job. It doesn't work like that. It's a totally separate exercise. You know, some people are great at job search. They're great about finding a job, but simultaneously are not really that talented or skilled or valuable. And you see those people getting jobs all the time. I'm sure you have observed that. On the other hand, you have people that are highly valuable, highly talented, that would be able to do a lot of good for an employer of some kind or an organization, and yet they struggle sometimes for extended lengths of time and being able to find a job, and that illustrates this. So let's kick this live stream off with answering the question, what's the most dishonest thing you've ever done? Now, I've never actually talked about this question on my channel. And I think my channel has been around for 6 years. I've never actually addressed this question. This is not one of the common questions, but you do get it every once in a while. This is something that, you know, when you do get asked it, usually you're taken aback, because it's so direct and kind of stupid that you almost don't know what to say unless you've really prepared yourself for it, right? That's the nature of this. Okay, you go to a job interview and they say, what's the most dishonest thing you've ever done? Now, obviously, this is a challenging question because if you were to give them precisely what they're looking for, it would obviously be bad. It's a very similar question to, what is your weakness, right? Or what are your weaknesses? It's a negativity question. And the problem is that if you give full and complete information and give them exactly what they're looking for in great detail, you lose because you've given them reasons right off the hop to eliminate you. And not only that, if this is your first interview where they're just meeting you for the first time, you're obviously trying to make a good first impression, because they don't know you. They're only going on superficialities, right? But if the first thing out of your mouth is like how much you suck, you know, how you have weaknesses, how you've failed, right? That's bad. So this question, if you start talking all about how dishonest you are and how you've lied and cheated and, you know, done all this kind of stuff, obviously that's really bad. But the problem is you can't just say, oh, I've never done anything dishonest in my entire life, right? Because that's not a valid answer. They know that that's not true either, okay? So what do you say? Let's get into it. Okay. Now, just like the weakness question, okay, if you go to a lot of recruiters and you say, how should I answer this question? When a recruiter asks me, what's the most dishonest thing you've ever done? A lot of recruiters will say, well, just answer it truthfully, because all we want to know is that you're being honest and, you know, you have some self-awareness. So you realize that you have flaws, you acknowledge these flaws and that you're working on them, okay? We want to know that you're growing as a person, and we want to know what you've learned by going through the experience of being dishonest and then, seeing how it turned out, right? Okay, so yeah, that's great. That sounds beautiful. It's a very self-serving, beautiful little thing. Unfortunately, you lose if you do that kind of thing, because what happens more often than not is that if you admit to the thing that they're wanting you to admit to, they eliminate you. And instead, they go with the candidate who, when asked this question, hasn't revealed anything bad about them. They haven't convinced them that they might be a dishonest person, right? So that's the catch. That's the challenge of this question. So here's the approach that I recommend and the setup for this. First of all, everyone has to realize that when you're going for a job interview, whether you're talking to a recruiter or a hiring manager, okay, whoever you're talking to, those people, let's call them the interviewer, you have a complex relationship with them. In some ways, they're your ally, okay? They want to talk to you. They are hoping that you will be the candidate. If you are, they've found what they're looking for. It's less work for them not having to keep looking, right? So they want you to be the one, right? But in other ways, they are your adversary because, first of all, one of the things they do in a job interview is, as you guys know, they try and peel away the layers and discover who you really are. Beyond the game face where, you're trying to convince them you're the most wonderful person who ever lived, they're trying to peel that away and see who are you really. So let's get to your flaws, right? Okay, and your job is to try and hide your flaws, right? Because the more flaws that they find, the less likely you will be offered the job. When you go down there and they ask you this question, you obviously want to answer the question. You don't want to deflect it, circumlocute it, where you go around it. You want them to think like, okay, that was a kiss-off answer. You're not really being very helpful. You're deflecting my questions instead of answering them. You want to give them a legitimate answer, right? But at the same time, you don't want to admit to any wrongdoing or any character flaws, right? That's the catch, okay? Now, so you can't avoid the question. You have to answer it. And one other principle here is that the longer your answer is, okay, the more you go on and give all kinds of detail, the more the attack surface is, like the greater the attack surface for them to poke holes in it, to ask you follow-up questions about it, right? So you also want to say something relatively compact and concise, right? Short. Okay, so you want to answer it in a compact way that actually answers the question, but at the same time doesn't reveal anything negative about you. Okay, let's cut to the chase. Here's a great answer to this question. They ask you, so what's the most dishonest thing you've ever done? You can say something like, well, I believe in honesty, but I also believe in timing and tact. Okay, so I've chosen the right moment and the right words instead of the bluntest words and the most immediate timing. Okay, that's something I would say fits all those requirements. Okay, I'm going to repeat that just for the sheer hell of it. Okay, they say, what's the most dishonest thing you've ever done? And you say, well, I believe in honesty, but I also believe in timing and tact. And so sometimes in the past, on occasion, I have chosen the right moment instead of the most immediate moment, and the right words instead of the bluntest words. And that's my answer. Okay, so that's what I recommend. Now, why is that a good answer? Why am I telling you that's a good answer? Because first of all, it's got a few things going for it. It's positive. Okay, you're saying a good thing. It shows maturity. It shows discretion. Integrity, all that kind of stuff. And it seems pretty confident. You kind of know where you stand on this, right? You're not kind of clearly showing that you have unresolved, your position isn't, finalized or crystallized on this issue. You've thought about it. You know where you stand. Okay. Now, most of the time, this will be fine. Okay, occasionally, depending on the situation, you may get follow-up questions to that answer. Okay, so they may ask you, for example, they might say, "Can you give an example of that?" Right? If you said, timing and tact are, the big thing, right? They might say, "Can you give an example of that?" In which case, I would recommend probably the easiest thing that most people have done at some point is you've given negative feedback to a coworker or a team member. If you're a part of a team or you're supervising a team or whatever, you may have given negative feedback, right? So that would be a great thing to say, okay? Where you phrase it based on tact and timing, okay? They might ask you something like, "Have you actually withheld information?" Because if you're talking about timing, they may push that button, and let's get into that. You could say, well, like a benign example of that would be saying, well, I've chosen the right moment to give constructive feedback, or they could call you on the other thing you mentioned. You talked about tact. So let's kind of get into that and see what exactly you mean by that. They could say, "Have you ever misrepresented information?" In which case, a response I would recommend is saying something like, well, just like the example with giving feedback to a team member, okay, I have rephrased things to save face and avoid embarrassment. Okay, so that's as far as I'd go with it, I think that's a pretty solid answer, and if you do get those kind of follow-up questions where they lock on to one part of your answer and want to go deeper, that should probably cover you. Okay, so that's how I recommend you answer this, and then they should never be able to eliminate you with this question if you get asked. Okay, let's go over to you guys. I see there's some people here. There's 37 people in the chat. Israel is here. I would just like to provide an explanation of a time when I was honest. Okay, I guess we could do it that way. It's like you could say, yes, I have. There have been times when I have been honest. You're correct. And I believe I can remember one of those instances right now. Let's talk about it. That kind of thing. Ash says, "I'm struggling with everything right now, and I feel like ADA doesn't fully protect me when it comes to my disabilities." Sorry, what's ADA? Is that an American thing? Disability assistance? Something like that? I already had 3 jobs that clearly discriminated me, and I got it in a recording contract, which stated it's legal. Look, see, the thing with this stuff is that, the laws are going to be different depending on where in the world you are. Okay, now I'm in Canada. If you're in the US or in different states, there's different laws, as I understand. If you're in different countries, there's going to be different laws. They all have different ways of doing it. At the end of the day, it works different for things like government. So if you're in the educational system or you're in another department of the government, it's slightly different rules than if you're out in the private sector. I'm from the private sector, so that's what I'm most familiar with. And in the private sector, as a general rule, they can accommodate people up to a point. Okay, the idea is that you want to try and accommodate people if there's something that needs to be accommodated, but yet they can still add value, right? The problem is that if somebody, you can accommodate as per the laws, and some organizations will want to really be enthusiastic about this. They'll really have no issues about doing this. Others will be more reluctant just with their culture, but you can do it up to a point. But then if the employee can't add value because their disabilities prevent them from doing the major aspects of their job, and you have no other jobs really to move them into, then you reach an impasse. And I'm not an expert on that kind of stuff. There are HR people who are experts on that. That's what they study. That's the kind of things that you study specifically in HR. So I would recommend that you find an HR person that specializes in disability accommodation, because that's not my core competency. I have dealt with it, but I've dealt with it with an HR person advising me all the time, right? So because we're talking across countries and stuff here, like Ash says, I'm in New York City, USA. Yeah, so I mean, you're in a different country to me, so I don't know what the laws are in New York City. I'd recommend you talk to somebody there, and they would be able to give you a much better answer specifically for you than I would be able to. Look, I can tell you generalities, and this is what I would say, okay? Although you are absolutely right to speak up if you have a disability that affects your performance, and people need to recognize it, and people need, they should accommodate it. If they do, there's a lot of value to be gained there. Definitely, right? But you also need to have the correct attitude and want to work with the employer on that, instead of just demanding one thing after another, okay? You have rights, but the employer also has rights too. And like a lot of things in this world, it doesn't really matter in one sense what the legalities are if people are just unwilling to be reasonable with each other and to work with each other. There's a lot of employers that can be damn unreasonable, okay? But there are quite a few employees that can go about this in an overly harsh way, where they demand all kinds of stuff, and they appear very inflexible, more than they need to be. You know what I'm saying? So just make sure you're not falling into that. I don't know what your situation is. Just make sure that that's not anything that they could kind of say about you. Okay? And get some specialized help from someone in New York City that knows the local laws. They'll be able to really help you on that. A good place to start is go to the government website. I'm sure you've done that already, but just in case you haven't, go there, and they'll have a phone number or something. You could at least talk to someone and get some direction. Rajan says, do you do professional coaching? No, I do not. Sorry about that, Rajan. Other than I do live streams. That's kind of my Q&A and my coaching and all that kind of stuff all rolled into one, because I'm a consultant as my day job. Israel says, how should I approach applying for an internal position? I work for a community college that has multiple campuses in a major city. It's called networking. So what that means is learn how to be as likable as you possibly can. Now try to find ways of being useful and being helpful to them. Okay? If you're someone that they perceive as being as wanting to help and being flexible, you do your job, but you are also open to doing other things too, right? Not everybody is like that, right? Some people just want to do their job and they don't give a rat's ass about doing anything more, right? They have that not my job kind of mentality, right? So make sure that visibly you are known to be flexible. You're always willing to help out, right? You're accommodating. You're the type of person they can come to and say, hey, I know this isn't strictly your job, but can you go and do this? Would you be okay with that? And you say, sure, not a problem. Hey, happy to help. That really helps if they perceive you like that. So that involves you interacting with them, hanging out with them, having involvement with them, and then communicating this in some way. Maybe not directly, but they observe your responses to things. Or you just put yourself forward and say, hey, listen, just so you know, I'm here. And, if there was an opportunity to do this, I'd be all for it. I'm really excited about doing that kind of work. So if ever there's something, I hope you'll consider me, something like that, so that they perceive you. And also they would want you to be in the role because they get along with you and they like dealing with you. It's always easy to deal with you. Okay. So that's what you need to kind of convey one way or another. So you need some interaction with them, and you need, content. You need topics to bring up with them or react to, right? You could do that by suggesting it directly, or just being around when something falls in their lap and they need it taken care of. Okay, so hopefully that helps. It's that kind of thing you need to do, and don't do everything in a formal way. if there's a new position that you think might be coming up, I'm going to adjust the brightness of my camera here. If there's something that's coming up, don't just wait till it's posted officially. Like, go and talk to people and just plant these seeds of like, say, if ever this is up, do you have work here, or do you have a position opening up there? Because, I'm really into that. I got some exciting ideas on, how to do that, and I'd love to be given the chance. Okay, hopefully that's somewhat helpful. So Ash is there. Yeah, Ash, like, I feel like I've answered your thing as to the best of my ability. I don't know the laws in New York to do with disability accommodation, unfortunately. If I did, I would be able to help you out further, hopefully. Arnthor is here. Arnthor is in the house, if you will. As a parent, I can legit say I use a lot of timing and tact. Yeah, especially if you're afraid of your kids, right? If you got that kid that's like, 6'8" and built like a brick shit house, pardon my French, I would imagine you'd have to tiptoe around certain issues, shall we say. No, I'm just joking. I understand. But you may, in a job interview, you might be tempted to use that as an example, for example, but, I would stick with like a coworker or something like that, something a little more to do with your professional experience. Rajan says, follow-up question. The CEO of my current company just resigned. What could be inferred, or what can most likely happen? Oh, great question. I love stuff like that. Oh, it can be a whole kaleidoscope of issues. I remember back in the day when, I was into like music that was made by a band as opposed to a single person. Like, so I'd follow rock bands and stuff, and in my youth, and bands would break up, and what's the thing they always say? Oh, I'm sorry, musical differences, right? The reality is that they hate each other, right? That was always kind of the thing in the background, because you can get over musical differences. You can get over a lot of problems if you all get along and have the will to do it, right? Usually when someone leaves, it's because something was not working. They had a strained personal relationship is what was going on. So usually that's kind of going on in the background, right? No matter what the real issue is when a CEO leaves, if anyone's interested. Usually it's a disagreement between the CEO and their bosses, the board, right? There's a difference of opinion of like, how the company should be run, how it's being run, that kind of thing. And that's ultimately what leads to it. The bosses no longer believe in the CEO. So that's usually the nature of the game. And it's like being a slave to the stock market or something. The prices go up, prices go down. But if they go down, it's always your fault. No matter how hard you've worked or what you've managed to achieve, it's always your fault. And it's just not good enough. So you're out. It's just that simple. That's usually how it works. I'd love to get into that more, but this chat is moving pretty quick. But thanks for the question, Rajan. Amaze says it feels counterproductive to pose tricky questions when a candidate is already qualified and well regarded by the hiring manager. Trying to disqualify a top-tier candidate seems senseless. Well, welcome to the whole job interview thing, right? I mean, as you know, Amazed, job interviews are not really about your qualifications, right? Everyone should know this. The application where you sent in your resume, that was about qualifications. But once you get the interview is not about qualifications anymore. As far as they're concerned, on paper, you're qualified to do the job. Everyone they talk to on paper is qualified to do the job. That's not what this is about. When you're in an interview, it's about what you're like as a person. Do they want to work with that person? Do they trust that you're being honest? Is it easy to deal with you? Are you giving a bunch of red flags, like you have all kinds of personal issues? You know, you can be qualified. You could have like 2 PhDs and yet be insufferable. You know what I mean? Where like anytime someone comes and talks to you to either give you a job or work with you, you bite their head off, you know? You insult them, you call them names, you just rage, you know? Like, it's totally not going to work. I mean, I don't care how many PhDs you have. It's like, no dice. That's not going to work. You know, the hiring manager is especially interested in what you're like as a person because you're going to have to work with them every day, right? And there are many people to choose from. The question is, do they want to work with you, right? You get a hiring manager who's a colossal jackass, and you just happen to coincidentally be a colossal jackass yourself, they'll pick you, right? You know, maybe the hiring manager is, you know, very empathetic, you know, humanist, a decent human being, you know, that's very soft-spoken. And you happen to be you know, one of those, right? Whatever it is I said, you know, an empathetic, humanist, decent human being who's soft-spoken. They'll pick you, you know? It's like you guys will click very well. You'll understand each other. You'll communicate the same way. Your expectations and their expectations will kind of be very similar, you know? That's what it's about, right? So when they ask questions like this, you know, it's not to determine your professional qualifications, it's to see what you're like as a person. You could have 2 people that have master's degrees in engineering, in mechanical engineering. They both design aircraft parts or something. I don't know. One is, you know, morally ambiguous, shall we say. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. They kind of double cross people in the office all the time. The other one is the opposite of that. You know, they have a high sense of integrity. They take everything literally. You know, if they make a commitment, they absolutely stand by it no matter what lengths they have to go to, right? You know, but they both have the same technical qualifications. Which one would you want to work with? That's what it's about. Okay, so these tricky questions, I mean, maybe I shouldn't do that because they are tricky questions, but if it doesn't make sense to you, one of the reasons why it might not make sense is because you think that it's about technical qualifications. This encounter isn't. Internet Vibes, what do you think of staffing agencies? They're fine. I mean, some are awful, some are pretty good. It depends. It's pretty much just like anything else. You know, just talking in terms of generalities is not really helpful. And in my experience, I think it varies widely. You get some horrible ones, you get some really good ones. Ash says, how does someone transition to a new career with little or no experience in the field? I did a video. I've done several videos, how to get a job with no experience and how to switch careers. Go check those out. Very short answer. If you don't have experience in the field, you can still change careers. People do it every day. Okay? Don't be fooled by the way recruiters conduct job interviews when you're interviewing with a recruiter. Because the first thing that a recruiter will look at is years of experience, right? So if you're changing careers, by definition, you will have 0 years of experience in the role you're trying to get, right? And if you go through a recruiter, they'll conclude, oh, well, how could you possibly think you're qualified if you've never done this before, right? Yeah, that's how recruiters think. Fortunately, that's not the only way to get a job. In fact, that's not even the majority way of getting a job. Most people get jobs through networking, right? Either you happen to know someone, which is less common, or what's more common is that you've reached out. So you don't know the person, but you've reached out on your own initiative and you want to talk to them, right? And they get a sample of who you are as a person. They also see your initiative and possibly your passion for the role. And then if you can make a sort of, you know, compact little argument saying like, you know, well, I have this, those are kind of the constituent skills for something like this. So, that plus passion, plus, as you can see, I'm easy to deal with. I'm professional. I have initiative. I have enthusiasm. Can you give me a chance? And a lot of times when people can give you a chance, they do have a job there that maybe isn't the most important job in the entire operation, but, it's something that they can afford to take a chance on someone, maybe a junior role or, a part-time role or something like that. They'll be impressed by everything they've seen. They'll say, sure, yeah, we might have something. Here, I'll tell you what, it's a part-time position or it's a contract position, but if you come in, we'll get a sense of, if you do this, we'll get a sense of, what your capabilities are. And you'll get a sense of if this is a fit for you. Okay, so watch my videos on how to change careers and how to get a job with no experience, and that should help you. That'll give you much more of an answer than I can give, very briefly here. Israel says, I really appreciate it. Thanks for the tips. You're absolutely welcome. Amazed. How can I explain to a recruiter that I chose to resign due to a significant shift in my job responsibilities without coming across as inflexible or unwilling to support the team in other areas? Well, the obvious thing is just not to mention that or not to go into detail, right? You control the narrative. They ask, what did you do? And you have control over what comes out of your mouth. So if you want to get into the whole sob story, the whole soap opera of what exactly happened, you can, if that serves your purpose, but I would imagine it would probably not. You would want to just say, this is what happened. They changed the role on me completely. It was a completely different job. It wasn't a matter of I was inflexible. It was they eliminated my job and they offered me a new job that was completely different, right? If that's essentially what happened, at the end of the day, forget about the formalities of it. If that's what happened, say it, and then it makes sense. And you could say, well, I had no interest or ability, really, experience doing the new job, but it reinforced my enthusiasm and my talent for the original job, and that's why I'm here, because this is the original job. This is what I want to do. So remember, you control what you say. You control what the story is when they ask you these questions. Okay? So don't do the thing where you just blurt out the whole soap opera and then go back and try and reframe it, based on what looks good to them or something, Present it in the right way to begin with. Undisclosed user says, what's your opinion on being terminated in January? What's RIF? Reduction in force. Under rehirable status and then rehired at the same company with a 22 salary cut. What's my opinion on that? Well, it kind of sucks. That's my opinion. Applied for hundreds of jobs. Nobody even responds. I've done it out of necessity, but feel completely devalued and horrible about it. Yeah, that's the typical experience if you're applying for jobs in the posted job market. I'm going to pull something up. It's not quite the thing that I've showed before, but it's similar. I've shown this kind of stuff that's similar, but it may be helpful if I can control my own computer here. I will help you out here. If you just bear with me for 1 second. Of course, I can't bring it up when I want to, so I will have to work on that. But I want to show you some facts because I say stuff and nobody believes me. They think surely that can't be true. That's too good to be true. That can't be true. And they have preconceived notions and biases, and they think, oh, it doesn't work like that. Well, it does. It's just that you have some stuff to learn. Okay, I'm just going to get this working while I answer questions here, but I'll come back to that. Regan says, if you're working a retail shop and a coach thinks you're not doing enough or well performed no matter what, you do or how you do it, what can you do in that situation? Well, first of all, tell me, are you doing a good job? Is this just a problem of perception? Or is it a problem where that person hates you, like they're biased against you and they want you out? So it's not really about how good you're doing, it's about, or how well you're doing, it's about they have some personal beef with you. You're like, because those are two separate problems, right? And how you fix it will depend on what the underlying problem is. Okay, so you've got to first determine that. I don't understand who your coach is. Do you mean your boss, like your coach? If you're in a retail job and you have a coach, I'm not sure what that means. I mean, I'm not a super skilled on retail. I never worked for years in a shop, but I'm not sure what a coach is. Ash says, interesting way to see it. I never thought interviews were like that. Are you talking to me? You mean like the whole bit about they assess you on who you are? Yeah, that's how it is. Now, I'd recommend, listen, if I say something that, sounds weird or whatever, I'm not asking you to just take my word for everything. Go out and do your own research, or what's better is go out and try things and see for yourself. Okay? But just so you know, the way it works with recruiters and indeed with hiring managers in any situation, it doesn't make any sense for them to call a candidate in for an interview who on paper is just not qualified. Like if the job requires a medical degree and you get applications from all kinds of medical doctors, but you also get other people applying, for whatever reason. And it says on the application, you must be a fully qualified medical doctor in good standing in this country to get this job, right? But you still get other people that apply, right? Hey, I just work at a gas station, but I'd like to do heart surgery. It doesn't make any sense to bring that person in for an interview if they're not qualified on paper. Because no matter how well you get along with them, they can't do the job, right? It's just that simple. So the only people you would call in for a job interview are people that you've decided have all met the technical qualifications. Assuming that what they've written on their resume is true, it's not a fabrication, they're qualified for the job, right? So you're already talking to several people that are all qualified. So you're not necessarily making a determination based on their qualifications. You're looking at now other things, because as we all know, you need a lot more to succeed in a job than simply being qualified. For example, there are some people who are qualified for a role but have no interest in doing that role, right? I'm sure you yourself would be fully technically qualified to pump gas, to work at a gas station. But if you have no interest in that, if you hate every moment you're doing it, it's not going to work out. You're going to leave one way or another. You know what I mean? Either you do such a terrible job that they fire you because you just hate it, or you leave of your own accord. One way or another, it's not going to work out. So one of the things that they're looking for is like who you are you enthusiastic about doing this actual work? Like, yeah, I know you want the money. Everyone wants the money, but do you actually care about doing this work? Are you passionate about it at all? Or some element of it, And I know that that's a tall order for some jobs, right? You want to work in a chicken rendering plant where your job is to like kill chickens all day? Like, hey, as I always say, it could be like a great hobby for psychopaths, but most people are not into that. They don't enjoy it, right? But they still want some kind of sign that, you'd be okay doing it. You have no problem with it. It's fine. If you show that, you find it absolutely disgusting and you hate the very thought of it, they're not going to hire you regardless of how technically qualified you are. You know what I mean? So it's things like that they look for. It's about more than just technical qualifications. Your enthusiasm, your motivation, what type of person are you? What's your communication style? Are you easy to get along with? Are you flexible? Are you accommodating? This kind of stuff, right? Do you and the hiring manager kind of hit it off? You're going to be working together every day. If you can't stand each other, that's a problem. If you can't even get along with them well in a job interview, what are you going to be like when you've got the job and this is like routine for you? You know, it's going to be really something to see, you know, how bad you guys get along with. People will pull up a chair and get some popcorn, you know. Right? So that's what it's about. That's what interviews are about. Okay, really. Chaos, there's a good name, says, I know this might be a bit off topic. I'm having my third round interview tomorrow and it is about behavioral cultural fit. What video of yours would you recommend me? I don't know. I've done so many videos of varying quality over the years that I'm not sure. I did a video a while ago called How to Be Likeable. That may help. That may be appropriate. You know, check that one out. You're welcome, Ash. Hopefully you get the answers that you're looking for there. I hope you do. Chaos says, is it a red flag when you answer conflict questions with, I did not have any conflicts at any of my previous jobs, but here's what I do? Yeah, well, I don't believe you, so I don't think they would too. And just so you know, a conflict, technically, a conflict is a difference of opinion, right? It's not the same thing as a confrontation, right? So you could say, you know, I believe that, all people who claim to be cultured need to eat escargot, okay? I believe that's a thing, right? And don't you dare suggest otherwise, right? And I could think like, well, that's crap. But I think it to myself. I don't tell them that. I don't challenge them on it. I don't call them on it. I just like, smile and nod. Okay. Right? That's a conflict, right? A conflict is when you have a difference of opinion. Okay? Whether you express it or not, you still disagree, right? That's a conflict. Confrontation is when you openly confront somebody about it. You say like, that's BS. You wanna talk escargot? Let's do the whole bare knuckle thing and really get to the bottom of this. That would be a confrontation. Okay, so a conflict is simply a difference of opinion. Now, you're not gonna tell me that you've never had an issue or a difference of opinion with anyone you've ever worked with in every situation you've ever been in. I don't believe you. So I don't think that's a good answer. I wouldn't consider that a good answer because nobody believes that. Right? Now, if you're interviewing for like McDonald's or something, like, the very entry level kind of thing, the fact that you said something coherent to the question, that might be a pass. I don't know. But in any kind of real job, skill job, career job, they're probably not going to regard that answer as very good. So, and just so you know, Chaos, the answer to any conflict question they could ever ask you is going to be some form of communication. Right? So, talking about a time when you had a conflict. Yes, I had a conflict. With my boss, they didn't seem to appreciate the efforts that I put in. I went far beyond what I observed my coworkers doing to get a certain job done, but they didn't seem to understand that. They weren't observing me. And when they looked at the results, they just assumed that those results would have happened anyway with a minimal effort. And so we had a difference of opinion about that. And, so what I did is I went to my boss and I asked them if they had a moment. And I explained, I said, based on your reactions to this, I've noticed that, you seem to think this. And, I'm not sure where that's coming from, but from my perspective, I worked really hard on this and that doesn't seem to have registered with you. And I'm just wondering if there's something I'm missing or, because I did do this, and I don't see anyone else doing that. And, is that maybe your expectation or are you expecting something different? Help me understand. I feel that we're not really seeing eye to eye on this. Something like that, right? And then the boss explained, they said, oh, I wasn't aware of that. Yeah, you're right. I didn't observe you doing that. And well, now that I know that, it makes perfect sense. If you were encountering that problem and you had to do this, that makes perfect sense. I'm sorry. Now that I'm aware of this, first of all, good job. Secondly, if you encounter that in the future, maybe come to me to get some additional help so you don't have to go to those lengths. And then, you can maybe get the result with some help without you having to work that hard, something like that. And then we'll all be on the same page, something like that, right? So you could tell a story of a time when you did maybe something like that. And then they'd be, okay, great way to resolve your conflict. You didn't leave, you didn't pitch a massive hissy, you didn't, get violent in the workplace or, start like shouting and making people uncomfortable. That was a great way to handle it. And you seem to have achieved a very good result. So way to go, you're a very professional person. So that might be kind of a better answer if you can say something like that or some similar type thing. Remember, conflict, the answer is always communication. If you have a conflict with somebody, the answer is always communication. First, you talk to them. Even if you get nowhere, you make the attempt. Okay, fine, I tried. Then you talk to your boss, see if they can help mediate, right, or advise. Oh, that didn't go anywhere. Okay, well, maybe I should go to HR or my union or, the government or whatever, see if that works, right? It's always some form of communication. And it includes you saying, okay, I'm sorry. I thought I was clear on this, but it seems like I apparently wasn't, So listen, here's the deal, I'm sorry if that wasn't clear before, but hopefully we could clear this up. Always communication. Talk about communication whenever there's a conflict. And then people will be, their mouths will be agog at your diplomatic skills, and they will put you on a pedestal and worship you like a god in the job interview, right? And then you can tell them to do your bidding. It'll be wonderful, right? Like a bunch of winged monkeys. Just think of recruiters as your own personal winged monkeys. You're probably imagining that anyway, but, not in a weird way. But great question there, Chaos. Hopefully that's helpful. There are 48 people here hearing me talk about winged monkeys in a professional context. Now, if you can't do that, what can you do? If you are struggling while we're waiting for the next chats, I got to the end of the chat while we're waiting for the next questions or comments. Check out these courses, especially that one. If you are between jobs and you don't know what to do, check out that course. That's all my advice in one place. And it's geared more for introverts than extroverts, but, for everyone. And it's also helping you with getting a job in the posted job market, but also the hidden job market. That's the big one. Now, I said I was going to see if I can find that thing I was going to show you guys. I found one, but it's not the one I wanted. Here, I'll show you this while I have it on the screen here. Okay. So I just, listen, people don't believe me when I say this. Okay. Some people just don't believe me. So I have to convince you. So I just went to ChatGPT. I entered this. Percentage of people who get hired through networking. Okay, this is what it said. So studies suggest that 70 to 80% of jobs are filled through networking. Right? Do you understand what that means? 70% to 80% are filled through networking, not through posted jobs. Okay? Additionally, around 80% of job openings are never advertised. This is good news. All of those jobs you see posted, right? Okay, all of those, they are 20% of the jobs that are actually out there. Okay, the other 80% of the jobs that are out there are not posted. Okay, and you can get them. Okay, but you can't discover them by doing an internet search. Okay, meaning they are filled through referrals and internal connections. Okay, now you see this? This is you. If you know nobody at these companies, this is you because you can do something called direct outreach. Okay, you can contact the people at the companies. And if you're an introvert, you don't have to freak out. You can do all this remotely, okay, over LinkedIn, a combination of LinkedIn and Google Maps and tools like that. You can do this. You just need to know what message to send to whom and what to say, okay? While the exact percentage varies by industry and country, networking remains one of the most effective. Yeah, it is the most effective ways to get a job because it's the most common way of getting a job. The thing is that there's a lot of different activities. There's a lot of different activities in this umbrella called networking. Networking simply means people talking to other people, right? That can involve a variety of things. You may already have a family member, okay, that you know they got their job through some kind of connection. They had a former coworker of theirs that went and worked for that company, and then they hit up that person and said, "Hey, I hear your company is hiring. Can you put in a good word for me? Can you help me get an interview?" And they said, "Sure, I could. If you send me your resume, I can forward it to my boss or something. And if they ask me any questions, I'll be happy to talk favorably about you if it comes to that. So you may have a family member that's how they got hired. That is one form of networking. Okay, it's not the only way. In networking, there's a lot of different things you can do, including the thing I just mentioned, like where you reach out cold to a company, right? Now, some people freak out when I even suggest that because, first of all, they think, who am I to talk to them, right? They're up here, I'm down here. Who am I? I'm a mouse and they're a giant, right? That's crap. Okay, you could talk to anybody unless you live in some country that isn't free, but if you're in some kind of, certainly the Western countries, like in a lot of other countries in the world, you can talk to whoever you want. They have the right to not talk to you, but you can talk to whoever you want. Okay, and then it's a numbers game, just like applying for a job. If you've applied for posted jobs, it's a numbers game. You apply for 100 jobs, you might get nothing. You apply for 200 jobs, you might get nothing. You apply for 500 jobs, you might get one interview. You apply for 1,000 jobs over a couple of months, you might get 2 or 3 interviews. Whatever the ratio is, it's a ratio, right? So networking works the same way. You reach out to X many people, 100 people, 200, 500, and you have a ratio of like how many people respond favorably, right? You could hit them up for a job. You could say, "Dude, hire me," or what's the female equivalent of dude? Gal? I don't know. I don't want to say something that's going to get me into trouble, but hire me. The only other thing that comes to mind is ma'am. What would you call Judge Judy? Anybody know Judge Judy? What would you call her to her face in an informal way without getting your ass chewed out? I know what that would be. Anyway, you could say that directly. It's like, "Hey, I do this. I'm great at solving this problem. If ever you're looking for someone who can do that, think of me. Here's my contact information. I would love to work for you," right? That's like probably the simplest thing you can do. And I show you how to do that in my course, right? It can get more sophisticated. You could ask for informational interviews. You go and meet people and you just talk about the industry, talk about where it's going, stuff like that. It kicks around ideas and then they get to know you and they like you and stuff opens up. There's all kinds of ways of doing this, right? So networking is this big umbrella, it has a lot of things in it. I don't care if you're an introvert. I don't care if you're a technical person. I'm an introvert and a technical person. And I did this. I built a consulting business around doing this. So I know what I'm talking about. And I've also taught this in schools. I taught it in university. I taught it in a community college. I did the capstone course in a postgraduate business course where I taught all the students to do this. And they all met CEOs. They weren't just doing it with anyone at the company. They were doing it with the CEOs of the company, which I've done many times. And they got selfies, shaking the CEO's hand. And some of those were immediately offered jobs just from doing that. There's a whole variety of things in there. Learn as much as you can about it and then start trying things, okay? This is the kind of thing that will pay off for the rest of your career. So if you haven't sort of gotten into this, you're just learning about it, don't take my word for anything. Go out and see for yourself. Do your own research. with things like this. It starts with like, on the very small scale with stuff like this. It's like, yes, it is a real thing. Okay. And then learn all you can from a variety of sources and then go out and do it. And don't listen to a lot of people that have a conflict of interest. Recruiters in general will want you to get a job through a recruiter. Okay. So they'll steer you back to a recruiter, right? We all know that that's not true. If you have a family member that's gotten a job from a networking connection, okay, you've seen it. You know it doesn't always work like that. So go and investigate. Talk to people other than recruiters. Talk to hiring managers themselves. Talk to bosses, and you'll see. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Okay, we got some more questions. Israel says, are associate's degrees valuable at all? I haven't seen anyone requiring one outside a higher education jobs. Refresh me again on what exactly an associate degree is. You see, I'm familiar with like bachelor, master, PhD, where in there was the associate's degree? It was like a subset of the bachelor or something. The answer is just like someone asked earlier about staffing companies. There is no one single answer to that. If you've got an associate degree in something that's hard to get, that's useful, and that, it allows you to do something that people are making money doing, it's not BS. It's valuable. They hire you. You can do these things. You move into a job where you do that thing. It generates money for the company, and it works. On the other hand, if you get an associate degree in some Mickey Mouse thing that there's no demand for and nobody cares about, and like anybody who showed up can pass and get the degree, so doesn't really say anything about your capabilities, then I wouldn't have high hopes that it's going to be super, super sought after and valuable. You know what I mean? Depends on the details. And on top of that, if that isn't bad enough, then you've got the problem of like industries have their own boom bust cycle. They're usually cyclical to a degree, and they're all doing booms and busts all at different times. So like now, for example, IT might be coming off a boom with AI and stuff, and it's kind of I've heard that it's sort of on its way down in hiring developers and systems admin, but other industries might be coming up right now, So, you know what I mean? There is no right, it's an unanswerable question. There is no one answer to that. It's going to vary, just like it always has. Amaze says, a recruiter recently asked, is there anything else you feel like I need to know about you? How would you answer this question? Well, they're giving you an open floor for you to make your pitch again. Now, what's the most important thing you want them to know? You want them to know that you're qualified. More specifically, you might have this, this, and this, and this. Secondly, what do you want them to know? You're enthusiastic. You have, maybe if you made some kind of case by saying, I have this combination of this experience, this other experience, and this education, which is not typical, you can make your case and say like, well, my value lies in the ability to combine these three things. These three things make, me a fearsome competitor for this. I can add so much value, based on how I have these three things in conjunction, I'm enthusiastic about it. I think this would be a perfect opportunity for me. I know about your company. I know that you guys have done this, this, this. I think that's very exciting. I would love to be given the chance to do this, something like that. They're giving you an open floor. It's just like when they say, what are your strengths? It's an open floor to talk about why you're the person they should pick. This is exactly the same thing again. Here's a second chance. Okay, so make sure that you understand what your pitch is. Like, why is it that they should pick you instead of someone else? What do you have that they don't have? You have your enthusiasm. You have your combination of skills and experience. You have maybe some personality traits, maybe something atypical in some way for the role. It's like, that gives me an edge. You might have other people that can, that all think like that. I think like this. And that enables me to find value that they miss, or whatever. So whatever your argument is, this is a great thing to be asked. Undisclosed user says, do you think we are in a recession and more and more people are losing jobs? What's your opinion on where we are going and the suffering to come? Recession is not a matter of whether someone thinks you're in a recession or not. That's kind of pretty easy to determine based on economic indicators, right? And I'm not an economist, so I don't really care too much, and I don't really know, but isn't it like 2 quarters in a row where your GDP declines? I think is that the definition? I think that's the definition, something like that. So it's pretty damn simple to say, are you in a recession or not, right? You can't call it early and say, well, I think it feels like we're in a recession, even though it hasn't been 2 quarters yet. Technically, you're not until that definition holds, right? And the problem is that if people start thinking like that, then everybody's got an opinion and there is no right answer, right? In some industries, they might be experiencing a decline. In others, they might be experiencing a boom, right? There's a few sort of things you can go to that, in one sense, don't lie. Things like the stock market. You can go look up the Dow, Now, you know what? Just for the sheer hell of it, let's do that, okay? So here, so this is the Dow. Now, this is 1 day. That doesn't really matter. 5 days, 1 month, 6 months, 1 year. Okay, so it's come down quite a bit, but it's still higher than what it was a year ago. So if you look at that as an indicator, obviously that's not the thing that determines whether you're in a recession, but it's one of the indicators that can give you an idea how things are going, right? Because this is not people's opinions that they will express. It's not some political kind of statement meant to influence people. This is where they're putting their money, And this is in particular the American economy, right? So if you care about the American economy, that's one very simple indicator. Like I just pulled it up in like literally 2 seconds. That can help you see where you are, right? But like, for example, let me show you something, just in case you don't know. I know a lot of people know this already, but this is the 5-year plan. So 2020, this was like kind of COVID territory, right? It kind of came up, it sort of steadied out, and then 2024, it just went right up. And now it's sort of coming back down a bit from recent developments. So, that's one of the indicators when it comes to determining how we're doing before you wait for the official 2 quarters or whatever it is to determine if you're actually in a recession or not. There you go. There's my economic advice 101 from someone who isn't an economist. The idea is that, like, look, you've got to be able to, how can I say this? I was tempted to do a live stream on this stuff, but I didn't think that I should really be talking about it. I don't know if I really want to be talking about it publicly, but it's like sort of my personal philosophy for this kind of stuff is like, whether you're getting a job or not, or whether you're doing some stuff in business, you're trying to succeed in business, you have to, the economy and everything is your industry. It's always going up and going down. I mean, that's just a fact. Things go up, things go down to varying degrees, but they're not going to stay down forever and they're not going to stay up forever. There's always going to be that movement, right? And built into this system is the fact that no one can really predict, because if someone could, they'd be able to rig the whole thing in their favor, and you would see them because you would recognize them because they become billionaires overnight and then they just keep growing, right? Like a game of poker or something. If you could rig the game, the immediate sign is that you would just win and win and win and win and win and you'd never lose, right? The theory is that you can't predict it. That's the whole point. You can find very good ways of trying to predict it, but no one can actually predict it. The moment somebody can predict it, it doesn't make any sense anymore to even have this, right? So no one would play the game if you knew that someone had hacked it, right? The moment it comes out that someone has hacked it, then everyone stops playing. So it's going to go up, it's going to go down. Whether you're looking for a job or whether you're trying to succeed in business, you have to be able to succeed despite the current economic conditions. You don't have control over the economic conditions, right? So you have to sort of make a plan that's independent of the economy. So you would have your first choice, your second choice, your third choice, right? And I know some people really pay attention to like, oh no, the job market is down like 2 points this month, or it's up 2 points, it's like, I think that's irrelevant. You still have the same problem. You still have to elevate yourself above all the other job seekers to get a job, right? Don't shoot the messenger, but that's the reality. So the more you work on your technique and the further afield you look, and the more methods, the more vectors, whatever you want to call them, you have to find a job, the better. It doesn't change what you have to do. You always have to do the same things anyway. Okay, so don't worry about this stuff. Don't be looking at the stock market and the economy every single day and getting all depressed about it. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. Just do the best you can at learning how to get a job. The discovery phase, what you would call ideation, where you try and, where can I look for jobs? I can apply for jobs, but what else can I do? Work on that, and then work on presenting yourself in the best possible way. And then, whether it's, out competing people on qualifications or, passing all the interview stuff, which is not based on qualifications, based on likability and enthusiasm and making a good impression. Work on that stuff. That's a lot of personal skills. Something you may have noticed in life is that people who have a lot of personal skills to do with communication skills, conversational skills, public speaking skills, they have a lot of charisma, they can talk to people, they are connected, they tend to win, right? Now, you don't have to sell your soul and try and be like that if you're not like that. Maybe you're like me, you're an introvert, right? You don't have to jump in and be exactly like them, far from it. But you need to learn basic things like making a good impression. Doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, you got to make a good impression if you want people to pick you. You don't know a million people, that's fine, but you at least learn how to reach out to the people that have the power to hire you. That's a very useful skill for everyone. That's what I would say. And regardless of if you're in a recession or not, you should win out with those skills. It might take a little longer if you're in a recession, but you'll still win. Undisclosed user says, associate's degree is 2 years of community college often. Okay. I mean, it doesn't matter what the degree is or what the qualification is in absolute terms. All that matters is that it's sought after. And if you want to know if a degree is sought after, like I've said this before, here's what you do. Go to LinkedIn and do a people search for whatever job you're wanting to get, right? Say you want to be, I don't know, a director of a television studio, if they still have those, like a working studio, okay, that where you do work in the private sector. Okay, that's what you want to do. You want to direct actors and production crew on a set. Maybe you've done that before, you have a talent for it, that's what you want to do. And you're wondering, should I get the director course as offered by, I don't know, the BBC in England? Okay, that's what you're wondering about. Is this a qualification I should get? Is it recognized? Is it valued? Will it open doors for me? Or is it a waste of time? That's what you want to know. Here's how you find out. Go to LinkedIn and do a search, say in your hometown or wherever you're looking for a job, for director, TV studio or TV studio director, whatever the role is called, right? And it's a people search. So the results will be individuals Okay, there'll be people who either are in that role now or formerly were in that role. Those will be the people that pop up as a result of the search you do. You constrain it by your region, okay? Right? Now, the first thing you can do is look at their profiles, these people. They're working in the job that you aspire to have. Do they have that degree? Now, if you look at them, if you look at 50 of these people, they're all in the role, and none of them have that degree, that tells you something. Maybe it's not really required, right? If, on the other hand, you look at 50 people that are working in that role, and like 40 of the 50 have that degree or that course, that kind of tells you that, it's probably a good thing to have. These people all seem to have it, right? Furthermore, you can look at, you're essentially looking at their resume when you look at their profile. So you can see, how did they get into that role? If you look at their career projection, did they come right out of school? Or did they have to work their way up through the ranks, step by step to get into that role, right? So that's giving you some hints as to what's valuable for qualifications and what maybe the career path is, right? Now, is it the be all end all? No, but it gives you some real world evidence of what's going on out there, right? You could do the opposite. Instead of looking for people in the role, you could do a search in your geographic region for that degree, right? So these are going to be people that have that degree, if this is an associate degree or whatever. Look at what jobs they're in. If they're all pumping gas, that tells you something. If they're all CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, that tells you something else, right? So if you want to ascertain the value of a degree, you could also do that. Now, that takes literally 5 minutes to do from a computer, okay? So I think everyone should do this as an absolute basic thing. What you could then do, if you really wanted to, is you could start contacting some of these people. They showed up in the search results, okay? Now, you have the ability through LinkedIn to contact them. You could send an email, you could send a connection request. If they have their email address or something written on their profile, you could send them an email, right? There's many different things you could do. You could ask them some questions right off the hop, or you could say, could we have a quick phone call? I'm hoping to learn a bit about this industry and how one develops the skills to rise up, and you're in the role. Would you be able to give me half an hour of your time? Could we have a phone call? Or could we meet? I'd love to just be able to sit down with you and ask you some questions. I mean, I'd love that. I'm just trying to learn. Now a lot of people will say no, but some people will say yes. It's a matter of ratios again. And if the ratio is 5% of people that you reach out to will say yes, if you find 150 people on there and you send the same template message, you got 3 phone calls or 3 interviews with people. They'll tell you exactly how they got into that role and what they think is important and what they think is important going forward, right? So these are the kinds of things you can do. Very, very powerful. And then you will know exactly what to do. You'll have a very, very good idea of what you're getting into, what's useful, what's not. And in the process, as an added bonus, you now have connections, to people in that role that you want at different organizations that you could call if you had any more questions. You end these interactions by saying, that's been wonderful. That's been very helpful. If I have any further questions, is it okay if I give you a call? Is that all right? And 99% of the time people say, sure. So there's a lot of things you can do from the comfort of your own home with a computer that will really give you the knowledge and open up a lot of opportunities for you. Okay. So there you go. So hopefully this is helpful. These are the kinds of things you can do. This is all under the umbrella of networking. Okay. Now, if you want to know more, okay, I put a lot of stuff in here. So check that out if you want to go deeper with me with that kind of stuff. Okay. If you want to learn how to tack on communication skills, above average communication skills that will make you a candidate for moving up into management and stuff like that, I put it into that course. If you just want to learn business with me, because that's what I am, I'm primarily a business guy, check out that. Okay, let's get back to you guys. Amazed says thank you. You're welcome, Amazed. Guru Prasad says, one of my interviewer previously was in direct conflict with me over targets I had achieved. To him, the targets achieved was impossible to achieve. He said he humiliated me and I was bluffing. Why should I simply lower my threshold target just to make it seem realistic for him? He cut me off whenever I tried to justify. It was horrifying experience. Chat as a subscriber. So let me tell you a story, Guru Prasad. There was a company that I went for a job interview many years ago, and this stuck in my memory, and that's why I've told this story before. They flew me to somewhere in Alberta. It was either Edmonton or Calgary. I can't remember anymore. And I had to I did sort of the job interview with like the owners of the company and the CEO and their female chief accountant. Like, I don't know if there was a CFO or just a controller, whatever they were at this meeting. And they asked me a question about the accounting side of things. They said, like, you know, when you operate, how do you do your budgets or something? And I said, oh, I do them this way. And they said, that's crap. You can't do budgets that way. No one has ever done a budget that way. It's impossible to do a budget that way. And I said, well, I'm very sorry to disagree with you, but I beg to differ on that. This is how I've been doing it for years. I learned it from the individual who owned a bunch of companies, who was my boss. You know, he did it this way. I kind of learned a lot of things from him. And as I understand it, the reason why they do it this way is to enable this and this. And they said, that's crap. You're either lying or that like doesn't make any sense. So needless to say, I didn't get the job, but they were wrong. It's like, no, we do it that way. It's just that we're in a different industry and we have slightly different needs, and you do it this way for some valid reasons. But I've encountered that too, where people just, you know, they haven't seen it, therefore it can't happen, right? You got to love people like that. And that's one of the reasons I'm a little biased against accountants. I feel that they are can't-do people that just accept trade-offs without questioning them. They accept status quo without questioning it. And they have no imagination to imagine alternate ways of doing things and how to solve problems. I'm an engineer. We are the opposite of accountants. We are paid to think outside the box and come up with things that have never been done before to solve problems, instead of just accepting the problems as something that can't be solved, right? So I've encountered that. Now, I would be lying to you if I said, like, I knew how to change that person's mind. Because if I worked in the same organization as them and I had the resources to do this, I would demonstrate it in front of them. That's how you change their mind. You don't talk about it and argue. You show them, like, here, this, like, let me show you what that looks like, okay? And that you might have to go to great lengths to convince the person, but that's how you convince them. There's no other way, right? Their mind is made up that it can't be done, it's impossible, and you just can't explain. There's nothing you can say that will convince them that they're wrong, okay? So I don't know how to do that in a job interview. You can't demonstrate anything in a job interview unless you brought, like, some kind of physical thing or demonstration with you. Maybe if you made yourself a diorama, if you have a young daughter and she made you a diorama with construction paper and sprinkles and paste, you can maybe bring that to the job interview and clue in these morons about how wrong they are. I don't know. But, you know, I don't know how to solve that. But all I can say to you, Guru Prasad, is that there's plenty of fish in the sea. For every complete blithering idiot that you encounter in a job interview, there's a lot of other people that aren't, okay? So forget about these people and focus on moving ahead to talk to other people that don't have their head up their ass, okay? If I can put it so poetically. Right? That's what you should focus on, in my opinion, okay? When you're young, it's easy to have your confidence rattled by an encounter with an idiot like this, okay? Just know this, you know, you're awesome, and you're highly valuable, you're highly employable, and you've done it. You know, no one can convince you it didn't happen because you've done it. You know what I mean? Right? So just remember that. if this person challenges you on it, they're a moron. And if they refuse to accept anything, they're a sheltered moron. So move on to the people that, that actually have a clue, and, then maybe good things will come. If you can convince this person, the fact that they're allowed to make decisions like that at that organization, that suggests that it might not be a good place to work anyway, so don't worry about it, okay? You know what I mean? You don't have to change anything. You don't have to revise your story. You don't have to be afraid to tell your true story about what you achieved, okay? Now, if you find that whenever you tell that story, you always get the same reaction, people don't believe you, then maybe you can adjust your sort of story. You could say that you could choose not to come out with these claims that it seems a lot of people doubt or they think is too bold. Instead say something that maybe they can accept. But you would need to see that same reaction from a bunch of people all in a row in order for you to change your story. Okay? Don't just base it on one idiot, one anecdotal thing. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Thwin says, nice to meet you, sir. And nice to meet you too, Thwin. It's great to see you here. And if you have any questions, get in the chat. I see there are 43 people here. Thank you for joining me today. You guys are all awesome. And I'm especially talking to you. If you have any questions about this, we started off this live stream answering the question, what is the most dishonest thing you've ever done? So if you're looking for the answer to that, I said it right to be in the live stream, and then we got into answering questions. So if you have a question, this is my forum for answering questions. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to answer questions in the comments under my videos, like where you have to type in a long reply. I don't use two fingers, but I like to do this just to illustrate how silly it might be. But I don't respond to them there, really. This is my venue to answer questions. So there you go. Guru Prasad says, thanks, Bill. Just that had got me a bit rattled that day. Thanks again. Yeah, and you know what's stupid? It's like, this is a common thing. You go to a job interview and they get you to deny your own experience. Like, here's a person who accomplished some goals and did it in a pretty bold way. And then they went to a job interview, they got chewed out by a recruiter who says that you can't have done this thing that you claim to have done. It's impossible. And of course, they're completely mistaken, because this person actually did do this work and did in fact achieve these results, right? And they've got the candidate doubting themselves, even considering possibly not saying this accomplishment in future interviews, It's ridiculous. This is the kind of damage these people can do. They've got, as far as I can tell, a fine, upstanding person here doubting the evidence of their own eyes and their own accomplishments. It's ridiculous. It's tragic. And first of all, my message is to recruiters. There's a lot of good recruiters out there, but there's a lot of bad ones too. And these people, this is where they abuse their privilege of being in the position that they're in. Okay? Secondly, for candidates out there, don't let clowns like this influence you. Okay? You're always going to encounter in life people that are stupid, people that are offensive, and people that are just going to put you down. They're going to insult you and tell you you're wrong and tell you, you're an idiot for thinking the things that you think. And a lot of times, they're the idiot. You know what I'm saying? They're the one that's sheltered and that are ignorant, right? Don't let these people influence you. You're hireable, you're valuable, you've done some great things. Recognize that and don't let your confidence be unshaken. Most people, when they're young, they're more affected by this when they're young, right? As you get older, you get a bit more confidence because you've seen a lot of morons and you've seen that, yep, wherever I go, There's always a certain percentage of people that are just idiots, right? But there's a lot of decent, smart people, reasonable people that are polite. There's a lot of them too. So you focus on associating with those people. Those are the people that can open doors for you, and minimizing your interaction with these clowns. Okay. And although it feels like they won, when you just had an experience like this, a bad interview with one of these idiots, it feels like they got the better of you, and that, you lost, and, they retained their position of privilege, and, they rejected you. Just remember this. If they are indeed an idiot and wrong about something this big, it's not going to work out in the end for them. Okay? They are the ones that have to live with themselves, because they're in a position that they don't know how to do. Right? That much is clear. Okay? So at least have that satisfaction. It may not be much consolation, but at least know that. Okay? And you focus on moving forward with other people that aren't morons. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. That would be my appraisal of this kind of situation. And good luck to you. Now we got 43 people here. I've reached the end of the chat. Don't make me try and sell you my courses again, because I got to do something to fill up dead space. So get in the chat and let me know what you're wondering about or what you're struggling with. There's a lot of people out there that, are struggling with posted jobs. They're applying in the posted job market. That means all the jobs you see that are posted publicly, like they're posted on the internet. You can find them on Indeed. You can find them on LinkedIn. You can find them on company websites. What I'm saying, like aggregators like Indeed, or Monster or ZipRecruiter. Like those websites that they crawl the web, finding jobs, and they list them all on their site, right? They don't actually post the jobs. They're like a third party that just lists them, like a listing service for you. They're called job aggregators, right? You can find these jobs. These are jobs that have been posted publicly. That's called the posted job market. Okay. Now, like I talk about all the time, for young people that, or people that are just new to this, they don't have a lot of experience with job search. That's the default place where you look for jobs. It's the obvious thing. It used to be like the classified ads in the newspaper. That's where you look for jobs. You see it in the movies. They open the newspaper and they start circling, here's one, right? The reality is that the vast majority of jobs are not posted. Okay. So they're out there. There are people hiring. And you could get the job. They could hire you. But you won't discover the job by, doing a search in a web browser or something, because it's not posted publicly, right? The job exists in the minds of the hiring manager. They know, I've got to add someone to my team. I have 10 people on my team. I have 10 workers that all report to me. I need to hire an 11th worker. Right? Now, the way this stuff usually works is the first thing they do is they think, okay, do I know anyone? Someone who would be good, that would probably be available if I called them up. Maybe someone I've worked with before, like a coworker, a previous coworker or something. We worked together 10 years ago. I know they're good. I got along with them. I know they know their stuff. They're a known quantity. That makes it less risky to offer them the job, right? As opposed to a stranger. When you post the job, you get strangers applying. People you don't know. They could be axe murderers. They could be fraudsters. They could be criminals. They could be, people that are like mentally unstable. Like you have no idea who these people really are. And it's really hard to really see who they are in like things like job interviews, So the best choice is like, okay, do I know anyone that I've worked with that's tried and true that could do this, that's available? Now, if the answer is yes, they'll just hire that person. They won't publicize the job. They'll just hire that person. The job is filled. I got someone good. It's over. Quickly, cheaply, effectively, right? Now, is that corruption? No, it's not corruption. That's human nature. if you had to do that thing that I always say, if you had to leave let's say you were rich and you went on vacation, but you've got a house and you have pets to feed and you've got grass to cut and you've got the house to maintain and you're leaving for 6 weeks, you need someone to take care of your home while you're gone. Now, who would you get? Would you get a stranger? You give them the keys to your house, right? Or would you get someone that you already know, maybe a family member, someone you trust? You get a family member, right? It doesn't matter if they're technically the most qualified person on earth to do it or not. The point is, you trust them, right? You know them. If you give your keys of your, fancy house to like a stranger, you come back from vacation, all your stuff's gone and your house is burned down, and the person is gone, right? Never to be seen again. They got all your, sentimental value stuff, all your family heirlooms, whatever the hell you have in there, your personal gold reserves, whatever you have in your house, if you're like that kind of person. Collector of exotic dogs, collection, and your fuzz collection. They got the whole thing, right? So it's not about necessarily your absolute qualifications. It's about other things, right? So that's the first thing they think. If they can't find someone they trust, they don't know anyone that just happens to be available right now that could do this. They start looking at other places. They might look internally. They say, hey, you guys, you're my team of 10 employees or whatever it was. Yeah, 10 employees. Do you have a friend or a brother or, a former coworker or someone you'd recommend that is good and is qualified to do this, that would work out in this job and is available now? Do you know anyone? That's the second place you go to, right? A lot of times when you announce a job like that, just internally, everybody immediately comes to you and says, oh, I got a brother, I got a friend, I got a former coworker, right? That's the second place that you would look. Okay. Now, the reason why you would trust them, you would take them over posting it publicly, is because here you have one of your valuable employees that you've worked with for a long time, and they're good, and they're staking their personal reputation on recommending this person, right? You don't know the person, but you know them, they're good, and they're saying, I recommend this person. You should listen to me. If they recommend that person turns out to be a dud, you'll probably never trust this employee ever again. They know that, right? So that's why it carries some weight. But let's say there is no one, right? Nobody can suggest, a viable candidate that would, be what we need, right? So then the third place that the hiring manager goes, the boss goes to, he might walk down the hall to the HR department and he says to the recruiters in the HR department, he says, do we have any resumes on file of people that we've interviewed recently that we haven't offered a job to, but we felt they were still pretty good and they were qualified and we've done background checks and all that on them. We've interviewed them. Do we have anyone like that would be a fit for this, that presumably is still available, and they want to work here, right? Do we have any such resumes? And if they do, they'll say, yeah, we got I think 2 candidates that may be a fit for this. We could maybe call them and bring them in. Is that what you want? Right? But let's say the HR department says, no, we don't have anyone recently in the last month or so that would be a fit for this. So then the fourth option is the boss posts the job, right? It's only the fourth go-to option, right? They're like, fine, I guess we have to post it. That's going to take money. That's going to take, now I got to write a formal job description. I got to figure out what requirements there are and do all this work and give it to you guys. Then I have to pay you either internally or externally to go and publicize this job, contact the people, find or get applications, filter the applications, check the applications, bring people in for rounds of job interviews. I've got to attend the job interviews, as do you. That's a lot of man hours we've got to put towards this. And all to get a stranger that we really don't know who they are. We've done our due diligence, but at the end of the day, we really don't know. Those are the jobs you see. Okay, like the exception is things like government. They always have to post everything, but anything that's not government, like that's what you're seeing, right? So the hidden job market is the idea that before the job is posted, right? Where it's in stages 1, 2, and 3, right? It hasn't been posted, but they're looking in terms of, do we know anyone? Do we have an internal candidate? Do we have any resumes on file? In that stage, imagine if you contacted the hiring manager right at that time. Just coincidentally, serendipitously, you managed to send a message right now, and they did actually have a job that they're wanting to fill. And you said something like, hey, I'm here, I can do this, I'd love to work for you guys. If ever you're looking, let me know. I want to work here. Something basic like that. Imagine if that landed right in the lap of the hiring manager during that stage. Well, you'd be the first person they talk to. Right? So anyway, I could go on, but like it's stuff like this. Okay, so when people are young, they usually don't know any of this stuff. Sometimes as you get older, especially if you work in management, then you learn all this stuff. This is how managers get hired as you climb the ladder. And you can take it. I don't care if you're entry level. I don't care if you're a student. I don't care if you're not even a student. You're not even graduated. You're trying to get an internship. You can still use all these principles to your advantage, and you can get hired above anyone else just because you employed some of these things. Let's see here. So I think I responded to Guru Prashad says, just that got me a bit rattled that day. Thanks again. No problem. Reese says, I got an interview cold calling and still nothing from applying to posted jobs. Yeah, cold calling is horrible. I hate cold calling. I'd never do cold calling. I don't really recommend it. I think a lot of the impression I get that I'm told repeatedly is that Gen Z or Gen Z, whatever you say, they want to talk to other people in person even less than like previous generations. You know what I mean? So cold calling is increasingly, unattractive. And I agree. I couldn't do cold calling. I think only a certain type of person can. Like, you have to be a real extrovert, social butterfly with very high self-confidence. I think those are the only type of people that can ever do that kind of thing over the long term. Thwin says, thank you so much, sir. Your videos helped me a lot. I really appreciate it. Well, that's great to hear. Thanks for letting me know, Thwin, and I'm glad that they were useful. Amthor says, thank you for your support. I'm a recently unemployed 53-year-old who needs to figure this networking stuff out. Hey, Amthor, it's never too late, and better late than never. You know what I'm saying? And don't feel bad about being 53. I've been 53, and it's fine. I'd like to think it's that perfect stage of life between having a lot of experience but not being too old and decrepit to use it, and still having some vitality. You know what I'm saying? So don't be worried about your age. And you know what? When you do this stuff, I imagine some people, certain types of people, might take you more seriously than if you were, say, 21. When you're 21, they might appreciate your energy and your initiative, and your enthusiasm. When you're 53, they might appreciate your wisdom, your experience, your maturity. You know what I mean? So you have a lot to work with. So far, I've been advised to apply in company website with referral link to no interview as yet, but I'll keep trying. Yeah, you could do that. I mean, that's like the posted job market. But if you want to tap the hidden job market with networking, I would encourage you in doing that. I've got a lot of free videos on my channel that talk about that kind of thing. If you go to my actual channel, my channel page, there's a playlist I did like years ago. I think it's called like how to tap the hidden job market. I think that's what it's called. And there's like six or seven videos, something like that, in that little mini series. They're only like a couple of minutes each, so check that out. That could be like a starting point. If you really want the full meal deal from me, it's in there. Okay, that's where you go. I put all this stuff into a course. The hidden job market and networking, you can't explain it in 5 minutes. You just can't. Every live stream, I get into it a little bit, and I cover, some slightly different topics within it, but they all take me like at least 20 minutes just to talk about that one aspect of it. So there's a lot to it. It's not rocket science, but there's just a lot. And you may already know some of the stuff involved because by virtue of being 53, you've been around the block a few times. So, it'll be probably less that you need to learn as opposed to, say, someone who's 20 years old. Mohammed says, I have a final interview. Appreciate your tips, especially on salary negotiation, as I didn't share with them any guidance, neither do they. Thanks for all your videos and the course. Well, great. I'm glad that it's helping, Mohammed. I'm glad that you're getting some value out of all of this. And it's good to see that it's getting you some results. I'm flattered that you're learning stuff from me. Never stop learning and learn from a variety of sources too. I'm not the type of person that's going to say like, only listen to me, because, you should get a sort of broad, a broad sampling of what people say. And, but have some critical thinking skills too. Like, corroborate what you hear. If someone makes a very bold claim, see if you can look into it and see if you can validate it on its own merits. And always make sure that, depending on whose advice you're buying, look at the incentive structure. Like, what incentives do they have? There could be a conflict of interest if they advise you to do a certain thing, but the more you learn, the further you'll go. And a lot of this stuff, it really has an effect over your career in the long term. So I understand that everybody's priority is like, they want to get a job now, and I understand that that's the immediate concern. But these principles, if you sort of keep learning and keep practicing this stuff, being likable, being connected, knowing what to say to people, making a good first impression on people, like all this kind of stuff, it'll really open a lot of doors in the long term for you. You'll rise up through the ranks quicker if that's what you're trying to do. Alternatively, if you're looking for, you don't necessarily want to make a lot of money per se, but you want to be happy, you want to do something you enjoy and that's secure and it's comfortable, you'll find that quicker. You'll find that sooner if you have all this stuff down, So, yeah. Okay, it's been like an hour and 45 minutes. That's probably good. I will actually be back in 15 minutes with another live stream. This is Wednesday, so I sort of go most of the afternoon. So if you want to join me in 15 minutes on this channel with another live stream I do called Honest HR Nitrous, that's where we talk about some of the ugly reality of job search and, what people encounter. So if you want to join me for that, come back in 15 and we can get into it. In the meantime, check out these courses. Once again, if you're looking to get hired, you don't know where to start, or you don't know what to do, check that out. That's where I put all my teaching, all my recommendations on how to get a job. It's all in one place, and it's for mainly introverts. It gravitates more towards introverts. So when we talk about networking, for example, we don't talk about going to networking events and stuff. It's more about, getting on social media and like doing a lot of things with social media and what you can do with your computer. So it's geared towards introverts, and it's how to get a job in the post-job market, going through recruiters, and also how to get a job in the hidden job market, where you go around recruiters, you talk directly to the boss and the executives and things like this, and you get yourself hired because you impress these people, and you discover all kinds of opportunities that are not posted. So check that out. If you want to develop your communication skills, develop advanced communication skills, the kind that you need to tack on if you're going to try and climb the ladder and be a manager, move into upper middle management or be an executive, check out that. That's all the stuff I had to learn to be in those roles. And I was a former CEO of a smaller company. Check out this if you want to learn business, best bang for the buck around. It can potentially teach you everything that you would learn in a 2-year Master's of Business Administration program. Literally can teach you exactly the same. You get the same result, okay, for $100. The catch is that it's self-study. So you got to do all the work yourself. You get a reading list and you get videos from me that guide you through it. But you're reading the same textbooks that they read in Harvard Business School in their MBA program and stuff like that. And the thing is that there's no tests, no evaluations, no assignments. So that means that you could go really in depth if you wanted to and do all the problems and see all the solutions. But if you don't want to do that, if you just want to skim the material, get a very general overview of how business works, you can do that too. That's the flexibility. If you only care about one or two of the topics, like marketing or HR or IT or operations or economics or innovation or organizational theory, like all the different, if you only care about a subset of those, you can take it and just learn that subset. You don't have to learn the whole thing. So it's very, very flexible. I created this because I know there's people that have a need for this type of business learning. So if that's you, check that out. Also, there's links in the description box under this live stream for all of these, as well as FAQ videos where I answer questions about the course so you see exactly how it works and what you're getting into before you pull the trigger on it, to be as transparent as possible. That's all I got. Thanks very much, guys. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Take care of yourselves. See you soon.